I'm Dr. Anthony Harper here at the National Religious Broadcasting Convention here with Dr. Richard Land. I'm going to talk about some key changes that are happening in the White House. There's some differences between President Bush's time and President Obama's time, and now with President Trump in the White House. So Dr. Richard Land, thank you for joining me. I'm very thankful.
Yes, sir.
And there are some significant differences at the White House. So how would you contrast the time of President Bush and then right after that, President Obama, and then with President Trump? See any changes?
Well, I can go back farther than that. I started working on public policy advocacy at the White House in Reagan's time. Mm-hmm. And in Reagan's time, they were sympathetic to us. They would often take our calls. They would call, and then in the Bush 1, they would sometimes take our calls. Mm-hmm. In the Clinton administration, they didn't take our calls. They didn't really care much what we thought. Mm-hmm. And in Bush 43, they called us and asked us for our opinions and asked us for input. And then under Obama, it was the coldest of cold shoulders. Mm-hmm. But now with Trump, we have unprecedented access. I was having a conversation early on in the Trump presidency with Gary Bauer, who actually worked inside the Reagan White House, and Ralph Reed, and with Tony Perkins. And we all four agreed, without any hesitation, that we have more access to this White House and to the staff in this White House, and more hearing for our concerns and our ideas than any White House that we've dealt with, and we've all been from Reagan forward.
Now, people have been talking also about some changes with President Trump regarding Bible studies in the White House and prayer. So what is there to these people's concern about Bible studies in the White House? Is that really happening?
Yes, it is.
And how often is President Trump attending Bible studies himself in the White House?
I don't know. I don't know if he's attending, but let me say, look, George W. Bush is a personal friend of mine. I love George W. Bush, and he was a very, very devout evangelical Christian, and is. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the staff in the White House, in the West Wing, and in the departments, there's no question, because when Mike Pence was made chairman of the transition team, personnel is policy, and there are more evangelical and conservative Catholic Christians in the White House and in the West Wing and in the departments than any administration since I've been dealing with Washington, and that goes back to Reagan. It's not even close. When I walk through the West Wing, I recognize people. I know people who are evangelicals. It's easier to explain evangelical concerns to evangelicals than it is to people who aren't evangelicals. And yes, there are prayers. I know of two that are going on in the White House complex in the West Wing, and I know of a couple that are going on in different departments. And it doesn't surprise me, because there's a significant number of Christians in these positions.
Well, there's also the concern about the Christian media at the White House. I know the Israel Prime Minister is honoring the Christian media, and very rarely do I see Christian media in the White House being called on. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the story is behind that. Why that's not happening more?
Yeah, I don't know either. I know that the president, I serve on the Faith Advisory Board, and he's very, very attentive to us, wants to know what we think, solicits our advice and counsel. For instance, from the first time we met with him, we were talking to him about prison reform, and he's led on that. From the first time we talked with him, we talked about the need to revitalize the inner cities and these enterprise zones and capital investment zones, which he's done. Both of those things he's done. And we've also, from the very beginning, said to him, Mr. President, you need to keep your promise and move the embassy to Jerusalem. And of course he did it.
Right. Along with this concern about Israel, many people are confused about some recent news reports about that President Trump might support a two-state idea. I know that I saw his meeting with the Prime Minister at the UN last year, and he said he'd prefer the two-state idea. So there's a concern about whether that he might go along with this, or the division of Jerusalem. Many Christians pray that would not be the case. But I'm wondering if any of the Christian leaders are actually have shared with President Trump, specifically the warning in the prophet Joel 3:2. It says, God enters into judgment in the valley of Jehoshaphat, the nations that divide up his land. Are you aware of any Christian leader that has shared the warning of God being angry about dividing the land?
I have no doubt that's been the case. We have been talking with him about Israel from the very beginning, and now I have to be careful here. I have been privy to a couple of meetings that were called to assure Christian leaders that the Trump administration in the Mideast peace proposals would not be doing anything that Israel, they wouldn't be pressuring Israel to make decisions that Israel didn't want to make. But as you know, there are people in Israel, very prominent people, who believe a two-state solution is the solution. I remember I was there for the 2008 celebration of the founding of Israel, and I was part of a group that had a 2-hour conversation with Shimon Peres, and he said there has to be a two-state solution. He said there are 3 facts that make this a necessity for now. He said, number 1, we're going to be a Jewish state. Number 2, we're going to be a democratic state. And number 3, between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, there are about 7.5 million Jews, and there are about 7 million Palestinians. And he said, if those 3 things are going to be true, there has to be a two-state solution with about 1.5 million Arabs who are Palestinian citizens living in Israel, and the rest of the Palestinians living on the West Bank and in Gaza. I don't presume to know, I'm speaking now for myself, I don't presume to know what is best for the Israelis. I don't live in their neighborhood. It's a very dangerous neighborhood. I know that when the Lord comes back, all that God has promised the Jews is going to be theirs, and it includes a whole lot more than Israel. But I also don't want to tell the Israelis, well, I know better than you do.
Right. Israel has been pushed around a lot. There's been a lot of concessions. And it seems like every time that they conceded land, they tried to appease their enemies. The terrorism increased, I should say. And so,
well, I think if there is a two-state solution, if the Israelis agree to a two-state solution, it will be with some caveats. For instance, I don't think the West Bank is going to have military forces on the border with Israel. I think there'll be some kind of a domestic self-rule, but not the ability to station troops close to the Israelis. I mean, look, the Israelis, they live in a dangerous neighborhood, and too many people on the other side want to exterminate them, and they understand this. And I've been to Israel 14 times. I admire the spirit of those people. I don't know if we would behave as well under constant threat of attack as they do. Last time I was there during the 2014 rocket attacks. We went over as part of an NRB group of solidarity. We went down right on the Gaza Strip. A rocket went off about 40 yards from us. I saw the Iron Dome knock down a missile. And we're sitting there having a conversation, and the sirens go off, and they all look at their apps. They all got an app on their phone that tells them where the rocket left from and how many seconds they have to get into the shelter. Say, well, we got to go to the shelter now. They just get up and go to the shelter. We're going to do what now? It's amazing how the Israelis. We had one official that was late for a meeting with us in Jerusalem, and he apologized, but he said, I live in Tel Aviv, and I live on the 4th floor, and we have 3 children, and the sirens went off, and he said, my wife can't get all 3 of the children down there by herself in time, and so I had to help her get the children down into the shelter in the basement before I could leave.
Wow.
It's amazing. Those people have an incredible spirit.
Oh, they do. And so the concern is, the most serious is about President Trump's peace plan. The results wouldn't be revealed until after the prime minister election results, which are coming up April 9th. So a lot of people are eager to know what this entails. I have heard that Saudi Arabia, from several news sources, would be bankrolling, along with other rich oil Arab nations, some infrastructure to make this deal work. Obviously, the
I wouldn't
Palestinian
say-
Authority, they don't have their own factories. They're
No.
not self-sufficient.
No, and you know, it's because of what's happening with Iran and with Syria. There's a strange alliance taking place, sort of under the cover of darkness,
Right.
between Saudi Arabia and Israel and Egypt.
Yes.
And it's sort of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because
Right.
what's going on in Yemen is an Arab, I won't say Arab because it's Iranians, is a Muslim version of Vietnam. What you've got in Yemen is a proxy war between the Iranians and the Saudis. And just as in Vietnam, you had a proxy war between us and the Russians, using the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese as the protagonists. And Saudi Arabia understands it's in a battle to the death with Iran for the Muslim rule and Muslim leadership in the Middle East.
How can people learn more information about what you're involved with? Do you have a website that you'd like to share
I
with
do.
our viewers?
I'm the president of Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina. They can go to ses.edu. We are all about apologetics, about defending the faith, and we are explicitly premillennial. So we believe that God has a special plan and purpose for the Jews, and that He made promises to the Jews He didn't make to me, and that He's going to keep those promises.
Well, great. I thank you for sharing with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.